everyone, and welcome back to another new episode. I know it's been a long while, but glad that we're here, glad that we're back. And today's episode, we are going to be talking about relationships with accommodations in them. This is especially important for, neurodivergent people, but it can also work for neurotypical people. But we're specifically talking in a neurodivergent sense, considering that the two characters that we are discussing and have been discussing are heavily neurodivergent coded. One coded more so with autism, the other with ADHD, along with mental illnesses that would make them not exactly neurotypical. Let's get into it. Now, before we dive real deep, we got to discuss what accommodations even are in the first place. Well, to put it simply, relationship accommodations are just reasonable adjustments to make which allow the other person to meet our needs. So, in the case of relationships, right, it's very similar to how workplace accommodations work, right? If you tell a workplace that you have a certain disability, they would make certain accommodations to make working for you easier. At least they're supposed to, but some of these jobs, they a mess and a half. But for the most part, right, they're supposed to have tools and other things to help you, with your day-to-day life with the disability that I've given. In this case, right, we're talking neurodivergencies, right? So there's certain adjustments that need to be made to make living with neurodivergencies easier. So, relationships, when we talk relationships in general, they're all about bringing two distinct individuals together. And we're inviting them to thrive as one, right? So it's all about that integration. That's the important part, right, when it comes to relationships. Now, to be in a healthy relationship, it would mean to be with someone who helps you grow and flourish, right? You want someone that adds on to your life. You want someone that can, help you on your journey to thrive. I mean, why do you think we call partners, right? Accomplices in crime. In this case, kind of literally. But they're there to help you out. Who's there for you when, life throws you curveballs, because life can be difficult. Life can, be throwing hands. You need to catch them. Catch them every single time. And being with someone through thick and thin and appreciating your significant other's quirks. I mean, absolutely beautifully, finally, you have a special someone with whom you can connect with. A healthy relationship feels like, all your burdens have finally been relieved in a way, or at the very least, now you have somebody who can help you out. You no longer feel alone in this world. It's like, wow, there's someone who's there for me. I call, in this case with romantic relationships, friendships with extra steps. Everybody has a different way of explaining it. That's just what it is to me, right? You have a friend who's there with you through thick and thin that you also like in the romantic sense. So of course there's that on top of it. Truly, a partner. So if that's how a healthy relationship feels, essentially having that friend who will help you along, which for these particular characters also adds on to the relationship that they already have, as we discussed in the tracking, right? Now, how does one maintain a feeling of love and passion in a relationship? I'm so glad you've asked. And that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to talk about the maintenance of a healthy relationship. And the first part today is through accommodations. And one way to go about it, right, is accommodating to your partner and making adjustments to make them feel more at ease, more at bliss, make things a bit easier. Again, similar to how, a workplace would have certain tools and stuff to make sure that, you working, it's not going to be as stressful because there's tools and guides to help you. making fair accommodations so that the other person can meet their needs is, of course, referred to as accommodating, as we discussed. This can be done in multiple ways, and the entire goal is to help your partner in small ways, especially if said partner is neurodivergent. So in this case, we're first going to discuss how Hisoka helps Illumi, other way around, and then we're going to switch it around, right? So similar to their relationship, we're going to do this in a cyclical fashion. It's only fitting, it's only fair. So, for Hisoka, this would entail understanding autism and making adjustments to make Illumi's life simpler, such as assisting with sensory concerns, because that's something to look out for, as well as adjusting for mental illnesses such as PTSD, psychosis, and anxiety. So, those are essentially the 4 things to consider accommodating. Autism, which is the neurodivergency, and the 3 mental illnesses being PTSD, particularly complex PTSD, but PTSD in general, psychosis, specifically anxiety-induced psychosis, so the anxiety and psychosis is comorbid with one another, but yeah, it's like the psychosis, which is anxiety-induced, as well as an anxiety in and of itself. The psychosis is not like often, right? It's only if it gets so bad to the point of, a panic attack being severe. And the funny thing is, right, I saw, funny enough, a little TikTok about it earlier, and I know it's like I have a lot of other sources, but it was kind of a coincidence how like there was a TikTok about specifically someone talking about autistic meltdowns and shutdowns, right, and the anxieties around that, which could turn into a psychotic episode. And it's like I've never heard anybody talk about it before, but I definitely know that it was a thing, right? And to have my observations basically confirmed, I'm like, so it is a thing. So it's essentially what we are looking at today specifically, right? And add on top of that complex PTSD, which also a lot of autistic individuals have, right? Not all, but a lot of them tend to have that comorbidity as well. So funny enough, this is also what we are all looking at. So for, everything to kind of just happen, we also have the other side, right? The cyclical patterns of it all. So for Illumi, on his side, he would have to understand ADHD, make adjustments to make Hisoka's life easier. And again, you see throughout the series in little ways, because it's mostly action adventure. We don't really see them do domestic things as much. If we did, it'd be more so a slice of life, which, my personal opinion, I would love to see a slice of life about these 2 individuals as a couple. I would eat it up every time, but that's besides the point. Let's focus back, right? So with Illumi, it'll be adjusting to understand and make adjustments for ADHD. That's the neurodivergency on, Hisoka's front. That's his. So, as well as mental illnesses such as ASPD, also known as antisocial personality disorder, and depression, right? Along with a couple of other things, but those are the main 3 things that we are focusing on. So, what exactly does this look like? Well, the accommodations Hisoka and Illumi have made in their relationship are going to be discussed today, right about now. Also, I want to preference that there are certain things, right, that I have also discussed, but not in grand detail, such as things like hypersexuality and things like that. But that tends to be comorbid with like the ASPD and a depression portion. So just know that I have talked about those things, as well as like appetitive aggression and stuff. It's just not in grand detail because we are still within Illumi's character analysis. Like this is still coming from that particular text that I've created. I'll talk about it in even more detail when we get to Hisoka's analysis alone. Like his complete analysis will have every single one of these things, the appetitive aggression that, along with just the aggression in general that tends to come with ASPD, more details about the depression and the ADHD, all of that combined, the cynicism. It's like we will discuss that in even grander detail when we get to his analysis. So that's just something I want to preference. Now, let's move on to the next big shebang with how these accommodations are even done in the first place. Now, Hisoka would need to do some of the things in order to accommodate Illumi, right? So we're doing his first, such as communicating with Illumi non-verbally, right? Because there are particular times, right? It's not non-verbal, mute, essentially. Those things tend to happen, especially amongst, again, neurodivergent, specifically autistic individuals. Each and every, autistic individual has different reactions to those symptoms. But this character, even if it's not shown as much within the series, the chances are pretty high, right? That shutdown is inevitable. So be prepared for that, non-verbal symptom to occur. So during this time that Illumi may need to recompose, especially during meltdowns/shutdowns, it is absolutely crucial to to create an environment that isn't overwhelming. So, for example, let's just say, hypothetically, Illumi had a meltdown. We can use the most recent one, which is kind of a combination of all three of these elements, right? The election arc was just basically all of that shit clashed together. The anxiety, psychotic episode, as well as a meltdown. If you want to think of it as all three just kind of clashing amongst one each other, because that was a very chaotic situation, can be that. But we're going to use kind of out of canon context for a minute, right? This is an inference. So hypothetically, Illumi had a meltdown. The best thing to do would probably bring him to a safer environment. Wait for consent to touch and provide sensory friendly items such as like STEM toys, and they can look like different things, Rubik cubes, anything that brings sensation to touch, essentially. Weighted blankets and comfort food, right? So these are just some of the small ways that we can already begin the accommodations, or at least in the case of Hisoka, right, begin that accommodation type of thing. Now, again, back to the nonverbal thing, which we're just out here moving in circles, but the nonverbal thing, right? So it's, first of all, very crucial to determine if they are nonverbal and then figure out how to communicate during that time. So in the case of Illumi, it would be crucial for his partner to figure out, are they nonverbal during this time, right? Make it established, make it clear. Sometimes during this time, if that is the case, you might use other ways of communication, right? Sometimes you would use sign language or simply yes or no questions that could help out the autistic individual, in this case Illumi, right, feeling less overwhelmed. Now, it also helps to read facial expressions as well as other forms of body language. And I mean, we're talking the age of technology, which is what we're in right now, and right? So it's also helpful to use electronic devices as another good way to communicate, right? Another way that Hisoka could accommodate Illumi is to communicate about emotional and physical domestic labor, which we kind of see already steps of them doing that kind of outside of a domestic situation, right? We already see those forms of communication within the series, so them doing it in another context is not going to be hard. So it's not going to be hard due to their egalitarian nature of the relationship in general. So some things like washing dishes are going to be difficult due to the sensory issue involving touch. Again, not all, but certain, individuals with autism will have a little more difficulty due to like certain sensations, certain textures. It feels not just weird, but painful in a way. Or that weirdness is just too much. And it's like, I kind of get it, It's like, it's all mushy, gushy, gross shit. And it's very uncomfortable. It's to the point that it's like a painful feeling. It's feels like your hands are on fire. And that's not what it's supposed to do, but it just feels wrong, right? It feels very, that's not right for my body. Ugh, your defenses are on high, and shit like that happens. And yeah, it's just not good vibes with touch. So there's that. So some things like that, be a chore that's not as frequently done by this particular character, which is, hey, okay, There might be additional tools as well. For example, I know with me, I don't know what I have, okay? But for me in particular, gloves help, right? Now for me, it's more so due to my skin issues, but it's still an accommodation for me, right? And I'm using myself anecdotally. But I know other individuals who do have this neurodivergency who also use things like gloves, maybe sponges with handheld, kind of like a handheld holder attached to it. There's different things that can make washing dishes easier. So there's that. Another example would be the sensory issue that would be somewhat shown in the series. Now, this does have some truth to it. There's not too much truth to it, but it's like a little bit. There's little clues and subtext that indicates this is a sensory issue, and that happens to be the sensory issue of sound, right? Loud sounds being kind of a bother to this character, again, kind of being a bit much of a pain. If you want to add on not just the sensory issue of sound, but on top of that, it potentially being a power, right? Kind of like Dolores from Encanto, kind of having super hearing. So it's like a little mixture of that sensory issue and that Dolores ability. If it's there, right? Then you essentially have the equivalent hearing, or what we're seeing, the equivalent hearing of a dog. And it's like, I can only imagine, right? Sensory issue of sound. And potentially, you can hear sounds that no other person can in general, right? It's just amped up to the 10th degree. That's got to be a pain to live with. So yeah, finding soundproof headphones for loud sources of vacuuming is helpful. It's like, well, what is some evidence or indication that like loud noises is not this character's thing? Probably one of the most obvious ones started off with their exam being like, I'm saying this paraphrasing here. It's essentially this character does not like guns. Doesn't fuck with it. The loud noise, it's not the Krispy Kreme wave, right? It's kind of like, and here's the part where it's like ironic. It's like a lot, these characters have their, oh, that's ironic moment, which I find pretty cute and hilarious, more so in the sense that first time I saw that type of thing ever on TV, I guess would be like with the Disney Fairy series, right? And like Rosita kind of being like, oh, I'm a garden fairy, but I don't want to get dirty. I don't like dirt. And it's like, she's a garden fairy, but she doesn't want to get dirty. Yeah, it's ironic. It's the same thing here, where it's like, essentially, it's like an assassin, but you don't really like guns. How ironic. It's like, that's probably why, Illumi as a character probably picked needles. There's multiple reasons why needles could have been the weapon of choice, but I think especially it's because needles are silent, right? When you go to a doctor and you have that doctor put the needle in you, I mean, you might create some noise because some people don't like needles, so they scream. But the needle itself sounds like nothing. There is no sound to a needle. Or like, if it's not medical and somebody uses needles in the drug sense for like other reasons, right? Or you use like a handheld needle to sew, right? A sewing machine creates noise, but the needle itself, silent, right? So it's like, that's probably the main reason. It's like the appeal to that, the appeal to having kind of a silent death. There's that. So what would help with the sensory issue of sound is soundproof headphones for a loud choice. Yeah, like vacuuming, because vacuums, they create noise, right? And some of that noise to certain individuals is disturbing, right? So that's helpful, having soundproof headphones for that. So not only that, right, but just making sure in general that Illumi is not overburdened with housework. Because before, I've talked about kind of the equal divide of labor. And if I haven't talked about it, I am now. So yeah, that equal divide of labor is essentially the goal. No one partner should be overburdened. And it should be egalitarian all the way, right? That includes with domestic labor. Or if heaven to Betsy, they decide on kids. Knowing Illumi as a character, there is a chance of that happening, whether it's through adoption or other means. Take your pick, take your poison. Yeah, it's like, so with addition to that, you want to add on the domestic labor of childcare, which in my personal opinion, right, taken to my personal anecdote again a little bit, should be a 2-parent type of thing, right? It should be a shared responsibility, which is another thing, right? Another portion of healthy relationships in general is kind of that shared responsibility and shared power in general. So it's really important to emphasize that even within domestic labor. So what would help with all of this is a little thing, a little, neurodivergent love language, if you will, that's called support swapping. And support swapping, to put it simply, is the act of providing and receiving support within a relationship. It entails assisting people in different situations, sharing support, sharing resources and providing emotional support. Reminding your partner to eat or give other health reminders is another way that support swapping is used, right? So essentially, this love language, it helps entails that each person within the relationship gets their needs met, right? Just making sure and keeping up with you being alive, right? Checking in, stuff like that. All support swapping. I'm saying it in a surface level way, but there's more that goes into it. But really simply, that's what it boils down to. Making sure your partner's good, your partner's making sure you good. That kind of vibe is the simplest way to say it. So one other way, right, that Hisoka could accommodate Illumi would be speaking more directly, right, in times of conversation. That's another thing to help with, especially due to the fact that, right, when it comes to, autism, and here's the thing about it, right, especially gather round, Mike specifically, a female at birth / socialized as female individuals. It's not really like figurative language in the figurative sense. I've learned this too, right? Because what's funny is we understand metaphors. We know what the hell a metaphor is, right? But apparently we took that question a little too literal too, right? So you can understand what a metaphor is, right? And have that metaphor be given. But in a sense, you feel the metaphor. Like, even if your brain knows, obviously don't take it seriously, your body takes it in a literal sense. And apparently, neurotypical people don't do that. Now, again, I don't know what I am. But I have this same realization. Just something to know. Back to the point, right? Of this entire thing. Yeah. Speaking more directly, right? The whole skirting around the truth type shit. None of the bullshit. It is what it is. Straight up. The blunt, honest truth. Okay? That's what's important. Cut straight to the chase. No bullshit. Now, again, it depends on how you speak. You could do it in whatever way, shape, or form, but eventually we got to get to the point. Okay? So speaking directly helps. This will also go into that healthy communication. You got to use that acting listening skills. Right? So instead of assuming intentions, Hisoka focus on expressing how he feels in a time of conflict, which the following factors might make this shit difficult at first, right? This is something that they probably had to work on within their relationship. And it might be difficult for him due to his dismissive avoidance that we have discussed earlier, the ASPD, antisocial personality disorder, as well as the general socialization of a male at birth individuals. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that men in general, their socialization is, already hyper individualistic. That might be a discussion for another day, because we won't be here all day. And when I mean another day, I mean once we get into his character analysis in general, we're going to discuss kind of more so a male at birth, socialization. Or if you already heard about, some of the things that tend to go on with that, right? Especially with the recent discussions of the Barbie movie, then you could probably already allude to what I'm discussing, right? So you could probably already imagine, it's like, yeah, that's what she's talking about. You already know the Gigiana. So, still, eventually, like I said before, it'd just be an easier thing that they would learn to do in general. So it helps to use I statements during times of active listening rather than you statements, right? So in this case, for instance, all right, let's back up here a little bit. We're using I feel you are not listening rather than you are not listening. And you can even hear, right, the impact of those words. I feel you are not listening. Sounds a whole lot nicer than you are not listening. You are not listening sounds too much. Like, what are you doing? It already sounds aggressive. The first one, I feel you're not listening. You're coming down. You're being humble. It's a softer approach. That's the goal here. Right? You don't want to sound like you're about to yell. Scary. Scary for anybody. But if we're going to add on top of, PTSD and the trauma that might exist already with that, right? You probably don't want to approach in a yelling kind of way, right? So again, interpret it as calling someone in for their harmful behavior in a calm manner. You don't want to go into it aggressive as fuck. Now, this is especially important, speaking of PTSD, used in those moments of emotional outbursts that can be caused by PTSD, right? It's like the depths of this particular disorder. It's like a lot of people talk about like the flashbacks and stuff, but that's not the only thing that PTSD has. There's a lot more than just flashbacks when it comes to this particular disorder, right? What else comes with it is the irritability, aggressive behavior can occur. Hypervigilance, an exaggerated startle response just for starters. It's a whole lot more, but if you want a really good outline, and that's about it, right? It's like it doesn't go into detail, but you want the basic outline. I would check out the DSM-5 if I were you. And some other sources as well, but that's the first thing, right? Because it's just the outline, like what the symptoms even are. I would look to there. But yeah, aggressive behavior, the hypervigilance, the exaggerated startle response, just for starters, right? And again, I say PTSD, but the addition of complex PTSD, if we're talking specifically childhood trauma, yeah, best to respond in a calm manner. Because you don't want to ignite those past traumas, right, when it came to parents. Especially when I talked before, right, about family dynamics, right? We had a emotionally immature parents in general, but particularly like an emotionally unregulated mom. They're both emotionally unregulated, don't get me wrong, just in different ways. But with Illumi's mother, right, there are particular, theories about it being potentially BPD. And I haven't looked deep into it yet. I will, but for now, right? That aside, just very emotionally unregulated. Very much like an emotional pendulum. It's just one way, the other. There is no in between. It's out there, just swinging. So you have that, as well as, ending up with a dad who more likely than not has either NPD or high narcissistic tendencies. You essentially have that going on, right? And you are a child, in this case Illumi, the child being raised in that kind of environment. Mess. You don't want to be reminded of that mess. That's too much. Partnership. A little bit of the opposite of that. Not saying that, it has to be perfect, but let's not awaken past traumas. There's that. So, during this time, Hisoka must explain calmly, which again would take some time. I believe first and foremost with their relationship, it definitely took time. I don't think it was day one starting the shit. It took some time, took some skills to get there. But I believe they're there now. It's been a while within the relationship, I'm pretty sure. So it's like they're there now. Will they have their moments? Yes. But they're there now. So, anyway, must explain calmly why a particular behavior displayed by Illumi bothers him without igniting any traumas or any traumas being ignited within him, right? That differentiation that we talk about, especially within secure attachments, come real handy here. Handy dandy. Yes. So, being willing to apologize, again, would take some time considering ASPD. That kind of thing. It's going to take a while to get there, but, I believe they're already there. It's just I might have taken a while in the beginning steps of the relationship to get to that point of apologizing, right? If he bothered Illumi and listened to his concerns. We saw throughout the series that, honestly, as far as I'm aware, Illumi is the only character in which he'll apologize to at all. Like, just period, point blank. It's a step in progress, all right? Baby steps. It's like, better it be somebody than nobody. That's all I'm going to say. Nobody said character development was fast, ladies, gentlemen, MBs alike. Slow character development. But it's there. Slow, but we're getting there. All right? Anyways, yeah, being willing to apologize, listening to concerns. If there's moments of contempt and stonewalling on Illumi's end, then he's prepared to focus on the positive aspects of the partner. We're also allowing Illumi to think and recompose, because contempt and stonewalling could be a moment of, again, shutdown. So, speaking of which, again, another way to accommodate would be, talked about it before, giving Illumi that space during shutdowns and meltdowns. And we're just going to continue on with along with space and bringing comfort food and weighted blankets, stuff like that. After which, the meltdown shutdown's over. If a discussion is to be had in Illumi's own time, right after everything's calmed down, the fire has been put out. Everything's calm. Everything's somber again. Then he gives them room to discuss. But if not, just let them to rest, as it can take a lot of energy out of him. Don't bring it up again. It's it. It's done, right? It's like the meltdown's over. It's like we don't discuss it again, or we discuss it in a calm way, right? But everything's about after we calm down. And it's like it's whatever. They go back to play fighting or being playful again, which seems to be also the nature of their relationship. Then, that's fine. It's easy breezy, lemon squeezy, lemon peasy. So, Illumi might also need breaks from social settings. And Hisoka might not, might actually have to try, right, to not make too many changes to Illumi's routine. Which, again, there's changes. And here's the thing, right, about Hisoka's character. And it's kind of his nature, especially considering the archetypes too, right? Him being the gesture archetype. Him bringing in change to someone's life is kind of his thing, right? But there are times in which that can be tumultuous, right? So it's some change is good, but never so much change to the point that it's tumultuous, right? Kind of balancing that out. That's the key thing here, right? So again, it's if we're bringing in surprises, not too many, right? Bring in any changes slowly. Be respectful of Illumi's schedule, which even without some of the chaos that he brings, he's still in general pretty respectful of Illumi's time. So that shouldn't be that much of a problem. As Hisoka also doesn't want to spike Illumi's anxiety constantly, right? We see a little bit of that throughout the series, right? Especially during the election arc was particularly the time where we paid the most attention to that, right? With all the chaos and things going on, he still did things according to Illumi's schedule. It's the chaos was controlled chaos. It was neutral chaos, if you will. Which for this character, he would literally not do that shit for anybody else. We already know what he acts around. The Phantom Troop, it's the exact opposite. Right? It's malicious compliance, if any at all. That's not the case here, right? There's no even malicious compliance. Any, more so malignant thoughts are just that, thoughts. They're never really ignited. They truly do care for each other. Because let me tell you right now, and let me tell you throughout this entire thing, right? I'm going to repeat over and over again, he would not do that shit for anybody else. I'm telling you right now, everything that I've listed Hisoka doing right now to be wow, he would not do this for anybody else. Yeah, he wouldn't. It's he's a good man, Samantha. To just you, Samantha. It's kind of this whole feeling, this whole trope, right? And I don't talk in the trope sense too much, but in this particular sense, if you want to understand it better, it's I hate everybody else but you. It's that vibe, It's not that great in real life, but if we're talking in fictional senses, for this particular character, that's considered progress. Okay? Great progress within development. It's wow, development. It's slow, but we're getting there. I'm gonna remind y'all every day. Okay, so some of the love languages as well that might be involved for Illumi would also be info dumping. Fun stuff. And again, election arc. We saw a little bit of that already. Right? It's good shit. And listening to those interests is a sign of us showing love. So it's how we saw that with the election arc. It's him telling, about the latest deeds, latest information when it came to the news and new information like that. He'd be you don't watch the news or anything recent, right? It's kind of a recap of everything, as well as him explaining, the whole Alaka situation, even though he wasn't supposed to, right? One of the rules in the Zoldyck house is that you're not supposed to talk to outsiders, which a lot of enmeshed families as well have that rule. It's just not blatant, but for this family, it was just straight up blatant. Like, just don't fucking do that or you'll get punished. And both kids who were outside the house during that time, that being like Illumi and Killua, they did that. They both broke the rules. I wonder how, if, we'll figure it out. We'll get there when we get there. It's like, it's still a looming thing, right? Like, that threat has never ended. So it's like, only time would tell. Pray for these kids. Anyways, back to the point, right? It's like info dumping. It's sign of interest to, like, Hisoka showing love, right? Kind of this, like, intellectual conversations and debate. It's also another thing that they would love doing together, right? Kind of getting to those philosophical conversations. And again, we saw how that happened already within the election arcs. Like, there's just something that they both love to do. So it's like, it's not a problem at all. Not a problemia. Other things could be like penguin pebbling. And some people take it to mean like pebbling things from nature, but it doesn't have to be nature, right? It could also be like sending videos about a subject to your partner. It could be literally just giving small gifts of any kind, right? It's like very small gifts that some people would consider quote unquote insignificant, but other people would be like, I appreciate it, appreciate that you're showing your interest to me in small ways. Penguin pebbling. It could literally mean giving things like rocks and flowers and things from nature, or other ways, right, of showing gifts. If you want to take it the more darker approach, it'd kind of be like, and due to the fact that this character, Illumi's character, is designed after a cat, right? Let's use the whole cat type of comparison in the sense that, how cats tend to bring in things like dead rats and other small dead animals for the owner to indicate their form of care towards that owner. It's kind of like that, if you want to take it that approach. Considering the nature of this character, it's befitting, actually. I don't think it's that dark of an approach if you're going to take it that way too. So there's that. So in the case of them, right, it's like, bringing in maybe a dead body or two, right, from a particular job. That could work. That counts. I don't think it'll be as common as people think, contrary to popular belief. But if it does happen, I think it'll be enjoyed from both parties. Just kind of like a trinket, a trophy, being like, this is what I did today. Fun shit. Or like a picture from like a job, right, that'll only be shared with his significant other. It's like, this is what I did today. Stuff like that. Yeah, so there's that, as well as, deep pressured hugs. And it's like subjects that he finds interesting. And the subjects could vary, right? We could talk in the literal sense of maybe like anatomy, right? Discussing about like just the human body in general, which, to be fair, is a very fascinating conversation. But other than anatomy, maybe things like anatomy, psychology too, if we're gonna be real, right? Kind of interest about like how the human brain works, right? As well as maybe some other subjects as well. If we're gonna talk, there was this one like creator I used to talk to, right? And it'd be like, oh, it's like, I hate the whole Disney princess comparison, which honestly nowadays it's like, I don't 100% agree anymore. My opinion has changed. But it's like, not really Disney princess in the same way, right? But more in a deeper context, right? So if we're going to use princess comparison, right? It's like the love of nature, right? It's like we could take the love of nature from a botanist or a biological perspective, right? So kind of knowing just each and everything. Or better yet, we could use herbalism too, right? Kind of knowing what each flower does and the benefits, and what type of poison each flower can produce, or each plant in general can produce, right? So it's like talking about nature in that kind of context, I think would also be important for this particular character, and I don't think it'd be that far-fetched at all. Not to mention, the more I think about it, the more it's like, you know what, the Disney princess comparisons are not that inaccurate. It just depends on how you take it, really. So it's like, there's that. But anyways, back to the main point. It also helps, right, that Hisoka's love language would be bestowing, affirming communication, and platonic touch. And there's a reason, like, the love languages, the normal ones in this case, have changed. And that's because the 5 love languages came from, like, this homophobic and sexist prick. And it's like, no, I'm not using those anymore. So now I'm using the updated version. And turns out the updated version has, like, 18. So these are the ones I'm using now. And I'll like it or love it. But go do the research about, like, how basically the current love languages that people talk about is actually pretty inaccurate. And how, you know, honestly, I feel like a lot of therapists just shouldn't use them anymore, you know? Mental health world is changing consistently. So there's that. So a lot of these accommodations just would not be challenging. Now, some other aspects to consider would be accommodating PTSD, anxiety, and psychosis. We discussed it somewhat already. But for Hisoka, you might also need to help during times of dysregulation, right? Because there's those times, again, where, you know, shit just hits the fan a little bit. And you gotta help with re-regulation, as well as helping during times of brain fog, which is essentially when your brain is, like, you know, a bit clouded. You can't remember as many things. It feels like amnesia. And it's not that exactly, but it works in a similar way, right? It's like you start forgetting shit, put it simply. In the case of a psychotic episode, you know, so it should tailor his approach and interaction to the way Illumi's behaving. Reassurance and not panicking are the goals. You avoid being confrontational, sarcastic, or patronizing. If things become hostile or challenging. So it's like all of this, right? And I just want to affirm that it may not be done in the typical sense, right? It's like reassurance, not panicking. Contrary to popular belief, things that can already be done, right? Avoid confrontation, which again, during the beginning stages of this happening, might not have been the easiest thing. Also something to work on. Sarcasm, patronizing, that part might not have been there in the first place. So it's like, that's the easy. But if shit starts getting hostile or challenging, right? Hisoka should not respond with hostility or challenging manner back, which, given his nature, can be hard at first. Make no threats, avoid raising his voice, not restricting movement, and being aware that the aggression is due to the anxiety that comes with psychosis. There's that. Which is especially true for Illumi, considering his psychosis is anxiety-induced. That's where it comes from, right? It's like very severe panic attacks, as well as, again, that autistic meltdown to psychosis pipeline is especially particularly true for this character. So, also, there are going to be times where shit does get violent, in which case you are going to need to de-escalate, and then you can restrain, which is probably, for this particular character, all in good fun. What can I say? Appears to be the best course of action. Though these appear to be rare occurrences in general, so like all of this is only if shit hits the fan, which for this particular character is not that common. It's only if shit gets really hectic, which for the election arc especially, shit got hectic. It doesn't get hectic often, so like most of the time, this character will be calm. You have nothing to worry about. So, these are just some of the ways, in whole, that Hisoka could accommodate Illumi. And in the next part, we're going to discuss how Illumi could accommodate Hisoka. Interesting shit, right? So when we come back, we will discuss the other side of the fence. See y'all in a minute. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Before we discussed how specifically, Hisoka can help accommodate Illumi and just make his life a little easier. So now we're seeing the other side of that fence and seeing how Illumi makes Hisoka's life a little easier with accommodations. Right? First thing that I want to point out is that the following disorders that would be accommodated would be ADHD, ASPD, otherwise known as antisocial personality disorder, which is in this case comorbid with ADHD. So a lot of those symptoms and disorders tend to be working together. It's a little on the combined side, right? And then you also have depression, which is kind of comorbid with ASPD. It's like all of this is combining into one another, right? Same thing on Illumi's end, right? A lot of disorders that we've discussed earlier, it's combining in a way, which tends to be a lot of the case in real life too. So it's like, just want to get that established. So, first things first, right? Is Illumi accommodating for all of those things? And the first thing that he would probably do to accommodate his fiancée is mostly doing tasks that he's already done canonically, right? But in a more domestic way. For example, Illumi would need to clarify priorities as well as devise a method to keep up with mundane tasks, right? So basically keep things active, keep things, awakening for that more so inattentiveness that can happen, right? Keep the brain out of focus. So accomplishing tasks by structuring them in a way that makes them seem like games, along with text reminders that they've been using throughout the series. So you already seen how they communicate on phones and other communication devices. So already doing a great job of that canonically, and basically kind of just doing a mini version of that within the home. Right? Because the thing is, when it comes to ADHD, otherwise known as attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, essentially, you are dealing with someone who is a bit more, have an inattentive presentation, hyperactive, impulsive presentation, right? We're dealing in this case with someone who has a combined version of both. Now, if it's just inattentive presentation, right? It's now called ADHD type something. There's too many letters. I like to just nickname it ADHD type 1. It used to be called ADD. It's not called that anymore. Right? It doesn't have the hyperactive portion in it. And then you have the one we most so commonly associate, right? The one we commonly see, which is type 2. So this is the more so ADHD, right? The additional component of hyperactive and impulsive presentation, because Hisoka would be considered to have both the inattentive and the hyperactive impulsive presentation, right? It's important to consider all of those needs following that. So we are essentially dealing with a character who may not pay close attention to details or, make careless mistakes. Adding on with the comorbidity that it has with ASPD, it's also something to follow and consider. So we have all of that going on. So yeah, just making stuff, more so active to keep the brain in attention. So next, keeping a chart to help with tasks is also helpful. And this is all to accommodate some of the symptoms of ADHD, which is difficulty managing sequential tasks. Like, for example, having a difficult time keeping materials and belonging together, messy, disorganized work, poor time management, and failure to meet deadlines. So I want to talk about this section specifically, right? And there was this one girl, I mean, she's a bigot, but even that aside, she did open up an insightful conversation specifically when it comes to the ADHD symptom of poor time management, which is an actual thing that people with ADHD struggle with, right? She called it a more so colloquial term, and I don't think most people use it, so that's probably why it offended a lot of people. She used the term time blindness, I'm pretty sure. And technically, right, that's not its official term. The official term is poor time management. That's what it is, right? And it's a part of ADHD due to difficulty managing sequential tasks. That's what it normally comes with. So just want to let, the world know, essentially, that is an actual thing that people struggle with, right? Essentially, scheduling, keeping up with tasks. It's not laziness. It's literally the brain saying that this is too much for me, right? Because again, when it comes to neurodivergencies, you have just a different wiring of your brain. That's really what it boils down to. So again, going back to this, right? And failure to meet deadlines, right? So remember the whole thing with Hisoka being like, you should be my manager, right? Help me out with tasks like this. Even if he said it in a somewhat joking manner due to him being that kind of person, right? All jokes have a little bit of truth to them. So there's that. It's important for Illumi in this case to use active listening and other healthy communication skills, because the goal is to help his partner and not being a parent to his partner. And it's really important to highlight that aspect too, especially considering Illumi's background of kind of taking care of everybody else. We already saw like the caretaker roles we discussed in my previous episode, right? So it's like kind of just letting that be put on the back burner. You're more so being interdependent with somebody else. Like you're helping them out, but at the same time, you are remaining self-autonomous, right? You are not being codependent, okay? The goal is to help and at the same time remain yourself. Don't be consumed by other people's problems. It's like you can help them out, but at the end of the day, it's their problem kind of thing. It's like learning how to balance the two together, which a lot of people struggle with, even me at times. I'll out myself using anecdotes here. I'm a people pleaser myself, someone who has dealt with codependent issues my damn self. I know what it's like to put other people before myself, right? I'm not coming from a place of judgment. If anything, I'm coming from a place of experience. I've been there, right? So there's that. Going back to the point of, this character analysis, the dismissive avoidance of Hisoka and refusal to be, dominated, be considered less than, out of a desire for self-autonomy, right? To an extreme degree, that individualism, hyper-individualism in this case, right? Hyper-independence is another reason, right? Why you would probably want to not be seen as like a parent and just be seen as a helpful partner, right? Kind of having those boundaries not be crossed. So that would be the case in this particular relationship. Kind of learning how to balance that out, which I'm sure at the beginning, similar to how I said it probably took time for Hisoka to develop those accommodations. I'm sure the other way around, it would be the same kind of battle, right? Probably took some time on Illumi's end to learn how to, back up a little bit, if you will. Especially if you come from, right? And in this character's case, came from an enmeshed family, right? Where there were no boundaries. And that if somebody's mad, particularly, right, if we're dealing with the narcissistic family model. We already discussed how if Silva's mad, everybody else is mad kind of thing, right? When you live in that kind of household in which, your feelings are essentially not your own and they depend on the people around you type of shit, it's kind of really hard to learn differentiation. But eventually you have to, especially in adult romantic relationships, right? Where it's just be like, yeah, you are not your partner, right? If they are upset, they're upset. You can help them out, right? You can understand where they're coming from, all this other stuff, because it's the human thing to do, right? To be like, hey, what's up, you know? But you shouldn't make it like your entire life's mission to make sure that they're happy before yourself. It's a little hard to learn how to balance it out, right? Other people's feelings are not your feelings, but at the same time, you still need to somewhat care, but not to the point where you're so self-sacrificing you forget about your own health and your own needs. I get it. Learning how to balance all that shit out, it's a challenge. It is a challenge. So, there's that. Parallel playing, which is the next thing that we're talking about, and support swapping are two alternative ways that can help with these accommodations. The objective of parallel play, right, specifically for neurodivergent partners, is for partners to spend meaningful time alone with each other, right? So accomplishing either the same or different chores. So in this case with parallel play, and I've learned this through some research essentially, is that you have your partner working on a certain task and you just have to be in the room with them, right? Kind of a silent way of support. Doesn't even have to be out loud. Silent way of support. So there's that. Again, it doesn't necessitate communication. It's a great time to spend meaningful time with each other, accomplishing the same or different tasks. You don't need to talk. One person could just be in the room. Silent support. You can talk if you want to. Nobody's requiring silence. It's just your choice kind of thing. It's intended to encourage the partner to do chores in the company of another person, right? That silence encouragement. Meanwhile, support swapping, as we discussed earlier, is the practice of making accommodations and supporting your neurodivergent partner, which again shouldn't be a problem because they've been doing this throughout the entire series if you paid enough attention. Most notably in the Hunter exam, York knew them literally switching places, so they took that term literally one time. Election arc, and now the Secession War arc. They've basically been doing it the entire time that we've seen them, so it's nothing new for these two. You know, they've been doing this for a while. Great stuff, great stuff. During the election storyline specifically, Illumi assists Hisoka to keep up with recent events, which is a minor example of him assisting Hisoka in organizing his ideas, as we see. Another less obvious example is assisting him behind the scenes, so off camera, in the Dark Continent / Secession War arc, as plans on fighting the Phantom Troops. So you know how like the Hisoka Corolla fight did not work out too well, and I imagine behind the scenes it's like, you're a dumbass. What the hell's wrong with you? This is what happens when your impulsive ass does shit. Now we need to plan shit out together. I would imagine that's essentially what the conversation boiled down to. And hence why now they have a more organized plan. It's like, see what happens when you have people help you? Great wonders, right? You can't do it all on your own, okay? That's the main lesson that we're learning. Can't do it all on your own. Get someone to help you, please. Especially if that shit is gonna be stupid if you do it on your own. It's like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever fucking heard. You need help for that. It's like, I'm good. Now your ass is hurt. Stupid. That's why you get help. But besides that, you know, Illumi should also emphasize Hisoka's strengths. Not too much, because you don't want to, you know, have that weird thing going on, because people with ASPD, it's like, love them down, right? If you have this disorder, just know I love you down. But it's like, love but not in a way that feeds into their ego, because that's still a thing, right? I mean, this is just a caution for anyone with cluster B disorders in general. You want to be real careful with how exactly you're emphasizing somebody's strength, right? Because the last thing you need to do is enable them. And this is especially true for Illumi, who is, a caretaking type of individual. It's like, let's not dive into enabling behavior again. Something that might be worked on within their relationship. So, that being said, some patience is required as well, right? As ADHD at the end of the day is a disorder, right? And many of these symptoms are not intended to annoy or make Illumi unhappy, or really, I don't want to say anybody, because it really depends on the type of person and how, Hisoka as a person would categorize you. It's more so on the ASPD end / general protections and stuff like that. It's like intimate partner, associates, people I don't fuck with seems to be the categories we're going with. So in the case of partner, right, it is understandable to note, right, that ADHD as well as ASPD, it is a disorder, treated as such. The patience is there, which for Illumi as a character is not hard, because naturally he is a pretty patient character, so this really shouldn't be that much of a struggle as is. Alright, it's easy to understand why frustration would be there due to being combined with ASPD symptoms, which again would increase the hyperactivity and impulsivity of ADHD. It's comorbid with each other, and we all know how Hisoka as a character is. Sometimes shit hits the fan. Is it intentional 100% of the time? Yes, it's a combination of yes and no. The ASPD is really not helping in this case. But at the end of the day, I can't even say it is what it is type of thing. Because it does require treatment, but it's there. How about that? It's a journey for everybody involved. So anyways, in the story of Hunter x Hunter, a good example, like I've established already, would be the Hisoka versus Krillin fight. Let's just say that was a humbling moment. Can we, gather around the table? That was a humbling moment for Hisoka. Let's not lie to ourselves here. Some of his perspectives have definitely changed. He is a somewhat changed man. The character development thickens, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs alike. All right. In which the ADHD symptoms, as I've discussed, of little to no sense of danger and acting without thinking, which is a symptom of ADHD. Not all individuals display the symptom, but in his case, yes, he does. He does. Combined with ASPD symptoms of a disregard for safety, right? As well as irresponsible and impulsive actions with no regard for consequences, right? Dealing with the impulsivity of both of these disorders combined. Bad decisions. Just stupid decisions were made. Hey, you roll with the crumble that you follow. Fortunately, and I do mean fortunately, this fight appears to have made him more cautious. It's kind of like a child touching their hand on the hot stove. Their hand's burnt. Bet your ass they won't do it again. It's crazy. And it helps that Illumi's life as an assassin and, Hisoka's assistance in that life of him being an assassin. So Hisoka helping out with those jobs, right, could keep up with those hyperactive moments and those violent tendencies that tend to arise. It is in a more controlled space, right? As well as his current job as a Heaven's Arena fighter, which in our world is the equivalent of an MMA fighter. Yeah. You channel some of those symptoms into a healthier outlet. So a good way to picture and compare this is anybody that's watched Mean Girls, right? Or hasn't watched Mean Girls, but I'm about to describe to you, right? A particular character from Mean Girls. There's Regina George, right? She had some of these, more so malignant things that she did, right? But at the same time, her leadership skills were top of the line. She had an anger like no other, and she can weaponize that anger at times, but damn, can a woman like that lead, right? She had the skills to essentially be a good sportsman. So funny enough, all that energy that was applied to that little clique group that she had right after her redemption, it was moved to sports, a healthier outlet, right? That way nobody got hurt again, in the more so psychological case for her, right? But it's like nobody got hurt again because it was pushed to a healthier outlet, in this case sports. All the skills that she did have are now being pushed into the more so healthier version within sports. That's what happened. I'm not going to go into great detail. If you haven't watched Mean Girls by now, what are you doing? Go watch. But yeah, it's the same thing, kind of, sort of, except, the only difference is that the violence is still there, right? But at least it's not pushed onto every and anybody. Contrary to popular belief, Hisoka as a character is more controlled than people think he is, right? He's not as crazy. He's still crazy, kind of, sort of. But it really depends on the person you are and how he'll categorize you. Which, for the most part, the majority of people, you're going to be fine. I'm here to tell you now. You're going to be fine. I don't know what that means, but yeah, you're going to be fine. So yeah, channeling it into either assassination work with his fiance, or him being a Heaven's Arenas fighter, kind of having all those moments, right, that comes with AHE, comorbid with ASPD, putting that into a safer, quote unquote. Remember, their morals are slightly different, so I wouldn't consider it safe by our world standards, but it's safe. And I can't even say their world, because even in their world, it's pushing it a little bit, right? You still have people that are adverse to him. So it's like pushing it a little bit, but not as bad as a Shay. We'll get into Shay's character way later. His character scares the fuck out of me. I ain't gonna lie to you. Moving on. That is, to say that, speaking of ASPD, Hisoka requires accommodations for this particular disorder and the impacts of the symptoms that normally harm others. Because, as we mentioned, antisocial personality disorder, let's just say it's something, right? He does display a lot of the symptoms as is, right? So let's talk about it in a little bit more of a detail here. And the impacts of these symptoms that normally harm others, because it does harm others, as well as a person with a disorder may be less severe for Illumi, and that is due to Hisoka's selective empathy towards him. So like how Hisoka tends to handle and treat other people, right? We saw those moments, kind of like, for example, it's not the official term, but it's, the quote-unquote term for that kind of anger impulse that tends to happen with ASPD, especially with the clues indicated. Like, he took the Hunter exam twice because the first time he got so angry that he severely injured somebody. I'm not sure if it was clarified, like straight up killed. I'm pretty sure it was just severely injured. Either way, shit hit the fan. And that is the common thing that you're going to hear right throughout this entire thing when it comes to this particular disorder. Shit hits the fan quite a lot. Now, to be fair, especially considering that, again, the term high functioning is not within the DSM-5, but it can be used to describe the specific type of ASPD that this character has. it's not going to hit the fan all the time, contrary to popular belief, right? It's like, it depends on the situation, environment, everything. All factors count here, right? You're not going to see shit hit the fan. Most of the time, this character, persona aside, we're talking the person, not the persona, the person, right? We're also dealing with a celebrity type character. And when it comes to celebrity type characters, similar, how do you do celebrities in real life, right? It's like you have their persona version, you have their version. I'm talking their version. Him, as a person, doesn't get angry that often. But if he does get angry, your ass best be out of the way. Best be out of the way. So, let's discuss the symptoms, right, that tend to come with ASPD. Because though we're saying that selective empathy essentially is protecting Illumi somewhat, that isn't to say it has no negative impacts at all. It still does. It's just really controlled, more so than with other people. We already see how these, adverse symptoms affect other people, specifically with the Phantom Troop, occasionally with other people he associates with, though to a lesser degree as well. Again, doesn't really like interacting with people that much due to multiple factors, this being one of them. Regardless, the symptoms are on the riskier side and they still necessitate care. So we have all of that going on, the whole shebang line. So let's discuss what the symptoms of ASPD even are. First symptom: the person manipulates, exploits, and violates the rights of others. Now, I don't need to tell you, how this is a thing, a whole shebang line. This character, most people, the description itself for this character is that he's a compulsive liar. So I don't need to tell you how the first symptom applies here. We see it throughout the entire series. Compulsive lying. There's that. Symptom number 2. They see others as vulnerable and may intimidate or bully them without remorse. They can also be violent and aggressive. Come on, man. For anybody who has watched this entire series or read the book, do I need to tell you how the second symptom applies? No, you gonna see it. And for those who haven't read the manga or, watched the show, you're gonna see it. It's the first thing you'll be introduced to about this particular character. It's why everybody's scared as shit, right? Around this particular character throughout the entire, series. It'd be like... Which made... when I go back to think about the whole Hunter x Hunter thing, it's like, why are you challenging this man, right? Are you trying to anger him? Yo ass is gonna get murdered. You are literally poking the bear. And at that point, I don't feel bad for yo ass no more, because you provoked it. The whole Lario scene of Hisoka essentially knocking his ass out, it's like, I laughed. Because, bitch, what the fuck did you expect? I mean, what the fuck do you expect with people in general? But especially people like Hisoka. It's like, don't even try it. You're not that guy. And it's like trying to assert dominance to who now? Yo ass gonna die. I pray for your soul. Number 3. Criminal behavior, including lying, stealing, and using aliases to deceive people. Again, do I need to tell yo ass how this symptom is ignited within this series? I mean, I will. But for anybody who's read the book, you already know. Obviously, the criminal behavior, which, again, when it comes to their morals, it's slightly different than ours, so I'm gonna have to use a different moral calculator, if you will. But things like murder, and again, there's gray areas with that, which I know what you think. Gray areas with murder? In their world, yes. Our world, fuck no. Their world, though, there's gray areas with murder. He does tend to take it too far, but a lot of the ways that he's done within the series can be explained legalistically, right? Legally, he could get away with it. For the Heavens Arena, I could see him getting away with it, specifically with how their NDAs might work over there. Like, once you sign it and shit like that, it's like, we are not liable to your injuries, da-da-da. You know, that kind of contract kind of thing could apply there. So I could see how, you know, even if shit hit the fan, you can't legally hold him accountable because you signed the contract. Like, if you die, you know, the company's not liable to what the fuck happens to you type of thing, which is dark, but hey, that's capitalism for you. I mean, it happens in real life too, so it's like, yeah, there's that. Hunter exam's probably the same thing, right? We're not liable to your injuries. This is a risky kind of thing, right? If your ass dies, it is what it is kind of thing. So there's that too. You have that going on. As far as assassination work goes, right? As long as he's with his partner, and a lot of the times you could be, you know, assassination work for politicians, so they could probably pay your way out or be like a waiver kind of thing, being like, oh, you know, I asked him to do this kind of thing, you know. So don't hold them liable for these actions. It's like there's a lot of ways that legally in this world he could get away with murder. Probably why in our morals it's like, why hasn't he been caught or anything? Because legally he can get away with it in their world. So there's that. But, you know, you also have the criminal behavior of stealing. Now, I'm not sure how often he is with the Phantom Troop, right? Because even in the beginning stages, the relationship with them is a bit rocky. But he does go on missions for them on occasion. Whenever the fuck he feels like it, but he does it. So that being said, he would be, you know, counting the stealing portion occasionally, but it's like stealing is stealing, you know, even occasionally. So there's that. And then using aliases. If you count personas, right? I guess that would count. Or using like a perceived image, which he does that quite often. So yeah, that's how number 3 is played out. Number 4 is the disregard for their own or other people's safety. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain, but I'm going to anyways, because, you know, some of y'all don't get it. Let's use the most obvious example, especially for, you know, my ladies, gentlemen, and MBs who have read the manga. Y'all remember that one scene in which he literally had his arm chopped off during the Heavens Arena arc? And I'm pretty sure he ate that portion of his arm too. He did it for the sake of entertainment, you know, inciting a crowd. But only a crazy nigga would do stuff like that. Crazy man. Disregard his own safety. Whole arm got chopped off. And the magic trick with his hand, right? Before, like, Machi patched him up, right? He had that whole thing with his hands, too. A lot of losing limbs with this character. For those of you that have not read the book, you gonna be like, what the hell? He losing an arm. He losing a leg. He out here losing limbs. It's like a doll. It's crazy shit. And, you know, last thing, blaming others for their problems. Does this happen as often? Not really. Like, most of the time, which is pretty shocking considering the disorder he has. I'm not gonna say hold himself accountable, but he recognizes his problems as his own kind of thing. Which, again, that might be due to the dismissive avoidance portion and secure tendencies that we've discussed before. So maybe that's part of the main reason we don't see this symptom as much. But yeah, that's all the components of ASPD that this character has, and he has most of them. So there's that. Now, dealing with an ASPD partner would both be the easiest, the most difficult thing that Illumi has ever done. Probably easiest, especially considering the family that he's came from. A lot of these behaviors, though they are vastly different from like MPD, there's some similarities with MPD. So it's not first time probably saw men like this or somewhat similar to this. Plus like the, criminal type of job background that Illumi has, which is him being an assassin. It's like, I've dealt with these kinds of people before. It's nothing new, nothing out of the grain. Also considering, right, they have an equal amount of intelligence, right? These are both characters that have what would be declared as superior intelligence, right? Both calculating people. So as far as that goes, right, a lot of these symptoms are, again, contrary to popular belief, it's to, I don't want to say a lesser degree, but high functioning indicates that you can blend into society. So it's not like as malignant as, say, low functioning counterparts. But even with that, right, people still tend to be wary, which, to be fair, is probably the best thing to do, because you never know. But you have that going on. So dealing with ASPD, easiest, hardest thing to deal with. The whole shebang-a-lang, And on one hand, due to certain characteristics, such as, for example, hypervigilance, could actually be a good thing here. But if we're going to talk like on Hisoka's end, probably the best thing to do, right, again, for Hisoka, for, calming Illumi down, the goal is to make sure he's not as hypervigilant, right? So you don't want those tendencies to arise. But at the same time, in case shit hits the fan, hypervigilance will be your savior, right, on Illumi's end. So, as well as being aware of manipulation tactics, because he is a manipulator both in his powers, right, as well as in the literal sense at times. Due to that's how he was trained for work, as well as the type of household, again, if you were raised within a narcissistic family household, it's a dog-eat-dog world over there. Survival of the fittest. So some manipulation tactics will have to be used to make sure your ass is safe. It is survival mode. Again, the goal is to make sure that these traits aren't as activated within a relationship. You don't want to be out here fighting 24/7 within your relationship, right? But if that happens, because life happens, shit ain't gonna be perfect. And for these two individuals, I know shit could hit the fan sometimes. So just in case, hypervigilance is Illumi's savior. So it would be easy to tell essentially if Hisoka lied, especially with those compulsive lying tendencies we got going on. However, due to Illumi's neurodivergence, which is autism, there's a bit of a blunt here, right? He might take some things at face value. So you have that weird mixture going on of being hypervigilant, but at the same time, taking things at face value. Having more of that black and white mindset, which along with neurodivergency. And again, it's less particularly black and white mindset from the autism perspective and more so from the, trauma that comes with being in a narcissist / enmeshed household of everything is this way or that way. There is no in between. It's more so from that than the neurodivergent in and of itself. But yeah, taking things at face value is going to be a bit of a fault here. So it's important to take one accommodation into consideration, which could help with the constant confusion that could occur with someone with ASPD, which in this case is not to take actions personally, which I know what y'all are thinking. What? Don't take it personal? Yeah, don't take it personal. Now, to be fair, especially with this character and having more so of those murderous tendencies, that shit can be a bit hard. But remember, as long as your ass ain't a target, which for the most part, Illumi is not really that much of a target. I say not really. So it's like, for the most part, your ass gonna be fine. There's nothing to worry about. However, there are some actions where you have to be like, is she trying to hurt me? And with this disorder in Pacific, shit can get confusing fast. Differentiation is also your savior here. It can be hard, but remember, in this case, we all must consider that the traits associated with the personality disorder, for the most part, is not intended to harm, right? We all saw, like, for example, let's use the electioner, right? That whole thought process would be like, oh, who do I kill? Who do I murder? But he ended up not doing that, versus if it was like, for example, a Phantom Troop member, he would have just fucking done it. It's like, he would have done it. There would be no thoughts behind it. It would have just been like, I'ma kill you. And he did! You know what's so funny? He did do that shit. He killed 2 Phantom Troop members, no thoughts. Just vibes. Bad vibes, but they were vibes. He had to sit back and think, is it really worth it if I kill Illumi's family members? Is it worth it? Turns out, no, it's not worth it, you know? It's like, there'll be too much damage. Again, that intelligence pushing back a little bit. Be like, it's not worth it. There's too much risk. Plus, I don't want to lose this partnership I have with this person. Whether you view that in the romantic sense or not, you gotta admit, right? Having that kind of pushback is not something that he would normally do, right? Restraint. There we go. It's not something his character would normally do. If he thinks about killing your ass, he's probably gonna do it. So the fact that he did it is shocking. It's shocking. It won't happen for anybody else. I'll tell you that much. I'll tell you that. But yeah, however, with other people, like I've discussed before, most part, it's like, it's not intentionally trying to harm Illumi. It's to the point, it's like, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Words you will never hear if you're not Illumi. Put it into simple translation. You ain't never hearing that shit. Yo ass is fucked. Yo ass is grass if you are not his fiance. Which, I mean, is bad for the most part. But for this character, hey, it's better than nothing. At least there's somebody he cares for. There's that. Again, Shay, the 4th Prince, that's a character that scares me because he's just darkness. He don't care for nobody. We'll get to him. But his ass scary. At least with Hisoka, there's still moments of him being human. Vast moments. Like, there's a whole lot. It's like, this nigga's hilarious at times. But yeah, with other people, that's debatable. It's like, if yo ass ain't Illumi, as long as you don't anger the man, or he doesn't consider you a challenge, which for the majority of people, he won't consider you that, you good. You Gucci. Pray for you, though, if you get him angry. Anyways, it may appear that the lies are the result of Hisoka believing Illumi is vulnerable, or that during arguments, which can happen, right? Again, those lying tendencies can happen. In this case, right, a lot of the lying tendencies, it's a defense mechanism, because maybe in their childhood, in his childhood specifically, the truth was something that was weaponized against him. Which, how can the truth be weaponized against you? If only you knew, man. If only you knew. Alright. Back on the focus. Hisoka says quips that are as painful as a knife, right? So during those times of arguments, which, knowing relationships, arguments are probably going to happen. Quips sayings, painful as a knife on purpose. But this is almost never the case. Again, this disorder, ASPD, is normally a trauma-induced disorder. Not everybody gets PTSD, right? Some people get personality disorders. And a lot of these personality disorders, yes, there's a genetic component to them, right? But it's also trauma-induced. So even if there is a genetic predisposition, it normally doesn't get activated, if you will, as long as that child is in a pretty healthy environment. But if that's not the case, right, and the child is in a very unhealthy environment, well, shit hits the fan. And knowing Hisoka as a character and what I've learned throughout his pre-canon and other clues, shit definitely hit the fan within his childhood. So, yeah, trauma-induced. A lot of these are defense mechanisms. That don't make it right, though. I'm just telling you what it is. That being said, after all, this is a personality disorder. Again, trauma-induced. Much of these malignant behavior, once again, is a misaligned defense mechanism. That is really what it is. That'll make it right, though, because it's still hurting others. But that's where the mentality comes from. I'll fuck with other people before they fuck with me. It's a mess. So Illumi must distinguish his sense of self-esteem from his more maladaptive symptoms. Boundaries. Very importante. Not the boundaries that, Jonah Hill be motherfucking discussing. No, we're talking normal boundaries, okay? Which Illumi has already shown to establish within the series, right? The whole, don't do that. I'ma hurt your ass. Now, to be fair, it's his way of doing it. I don't recommend anybody else doing it that way, but it works, okay, for them. Remember, it's not going to be done in the most typical way. It's done in a very atypical fashion, but it works. The right idea is there. That's all that matters. The most flat out being that, again, in the Hunter exam, he states that, one, he just wouldn't fight Hisoka, like at all. That's just something that he won't do. Most likely due to being, one, too risky, which is true, and ruining the relationship that they do have, which in the beginning stages of the Hunter exam, I believe they were in stage 1 of the relationship, not stage 1, stage 2 of the relationship staircase, if I remember correctly. So kind of dismantling that already, right, would be counterproductive. There'd be no point to that. So this can still be difficult because the ASPD symptom of lack of empathy, lack of or no empathy, right? In this case, lack of, because it's there. It's just not used on a whole lot of people. So can make things slightly more frustrating. Again, also, on top of that, it's like there. The type of empathy in this case would be cognitive rather than emotional, right? Most people have a combination of both emotional and cognitive empathy. But specifically for my, cluster B disordered individuals, they more so rely on, if they do rely on empathy, cognitive empathy. Which Hisoka has demonstrated at times to have, so this issue is slightly negated. Again, those secure tendencies, cognitive empathy, so that lack of empathy, it really depends, again, on the classification of, you and Hisoka's interpersonal relationship. So it depends on how he sees you. Either he'll care about you somewhat, or care about you in general, to a certain degree, or he just won't give a fuck at all. Really depends. So another thing to prepare for is violent tendencies, which we already seen throughout the series, which for Hisoka are added on with appetitive aggression, which essentially means having a pleasure in violence, right? The appetitive aggression on top of the aggressive tendencies with this disorder in general, the impulsive, angry moments, all that shit combined with the appetitive aggression, which is, again, that pleasure for violence, as we very much so see with this character. It is shown to affect others in the series, including the main four, aka Gon, Leorio, Killua, and Kurapika. We already seen how it affects them in different ways. The Phantom Troop, and many others. Now for Gon specifically, it was used as a positive narrative tool, contrary to popular belief, to push him to learn more about Nen and strengthen his abilities, right? So it was kind of the tool that pushed Gon as a character to, you know, drive himself further and push him more towards his goal of, you know, meeting up with his dad and making sure that he has substantial amount of power, if you will, right? It was used as a powerful, positive narrative tool to push that character forward as the protagonist. So in this case, it was helpful, and strengthened his abilities, even though it was through unconventional, and to be fair, unconventional means. Would I have recommended it be done in his way, in Hisoka's way? No. But it worked. A mentor is a mentor, even if it's an unconventional one. He's an interesting mentor, but the job was done. And although, right, Hisoka, for like Killua in particular, didn't react like violently towards Killua, the threat remained. You know, he still did threaten his life. I'm not gonna discredit that. It's like, yeah, he did that shit, but he ain't gonna do nothing about it. And I feel like the main reason, and not even I feel like, the main reason, let's talk real, the main reason for Killua not having any violent attacks being placed on him is due to Hisoka knowing it crosses a boundary with Illumi to hurt family. So let's just say that relationship is protecting Killua's life, because if that was not the case, his ass would have been gone. Just saying. So, for Leorio, Hisoka only truly reacted to him violently at times due to self-defense. Because I told you, Leorio was playing stupid games, and he won stupid prizes. He poked the motherfucking bear. It was like he was, you know, agitating the man. It's like, damn. It's like, again, that shit made me fucking laugh, because I was like, what do you expect? You're lucky his ass didn't try to kill you. It's like, be grateful your ass ain't dead, because realistically, we're talking realistic, should have been. And that's real. Alright. So, I'll say this, and these were non-fatal attacks. It's like, you're lucky your ass didn't die. So, for Leorio, as long as his character doesn't agitate Hisoka, he should be fine. Like, what's not to get? What's not to understand? Oh, shit's hilarious. And for Kurapika, as we know, they were associates with each other. They were working together, right? So they didn't have true moments of violence with each other either, because the two were working towards the common goal, and ruining it with impulses on Hisoka's end would ruin the plan to bring Crollo closer to challenging Hisoka, challenging Crollo, right, and challenging him, and defeating Crollo as well as the Phantom Troop, right? In terms of other people that he's not allied with, so he's not associated with at all, or who are not his current romantic partner, so Illumi, which, to be fair, is kind of put up on a pedestal compared to anybody else. Is it the healthiest way of thinking? No, but in this way, it's like, there's somebody there. The pedestal needs to be there, otherwise shit could get so much worse. Keep it. I wouldn't say this for anybody else, but it's like, for him, oh, it needs to be there. The terms are simple, right? If you are not Illumi or literally any associate that he has, which is not that many. Phantom Troop don't count no more. Them motherfuckers enemies now, but it's like, they were never really that closely allied with in the first place. But hey, you know, that's besides the McShickety point. And, you know, him and Crollo's friends, it's like, not no more. It's like, that friendship gone. Anyways, so unless you are allied with him in some shape, form, or fashion, or, you know, his romantic partner, shit like that, I'm gonna say this. the majority of people, again, he ain't gonna consider your ass a challenge. You're fine. So as long as you're not that, and as long as you don't get in the way or agitate him, which, to be fair, when it comes to ASPD individuals, unless you know them personally and know what their triggers are, I would tread with caution. Okay? And that's due to the hypersensitivity that ASPD comes with. Also, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, right, that comes with ADHD. And you have that as a comorbidity, and with this character, this shit is combining. So, the best thing to do, if you are essentially an outsider, is be wary. Just be cautious. Tread with caution, tread slowly. Alright? That's your best option. Now, we're going to come back for the next part, because there's more. This is going to be divided a little bit more. So I'll be right back. So right now, let's take a quick break, right? Let's reflect the facts that are given so far. We'll be right back. Hello everybody, welcome back. Before we have discussed part 1 of how Illumi has accommodated Hisoka throughout, things like ASPD, ADHD, and others, things, so let's continue on that conversation. Let's continue that train, if you will. So before we've discussed essentially and established, it's like, hey, do not agitate, right? So let's continue that conversation. So targets for assassination and bounty hunting for like both of these individuals, like Hisoka and Illumi, right? It's like if you're a target, you do not count for that consideration of being wary and being just like, just be a little careful. Like, you don't count. You a target. Bitch, it's over. It's a wrap for you. I know what to say, right? Because like not everybody ends up on hit lists. You gotta be a special brand of human to be on a hit list. How the fuck are you on a hit list? Now, there are rare cases where, like, people that I would consider is like, okay, you don't deserve to be on a hit list, but you're on a hit list anyways because you fucked with a person who essentially is, a bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But the majority of times, like, you on a hit list for a reason. Probably. Sometimes it'd be like, people just hate your ass, right? You have no reason to be on a hit list, but you're on a hit list because somebody hates you. But most of the time, you did something. And I don't feel bad. I know it's probably somewhat evil to say, but it's like, I'm willing to admit, I do not care. Right? It's like, oh my God, how could you? People say the government was probably planning on killing them anyways. So they just do the job for them. Period. Vigilantes. Anyways, does not count for this consideration. Your ass is grass. But if you are caught in the collateral, meaning you are not the target, but you're outside, you're as close proximity to the crime scene, I'm gonna need you to back up by 1,000,000, right? Be nowhere near that crime scene. There ain't much that you can do except just get away from the crime scene. You do not need to be collateral damage. You in the background. You doing whatever. For what? Back up. I would say, especially during the time of Illumi's moment, there's not much anybody could have done in that situation. And it's not nobody's fault for that poor crowd that happened to be in the middle of the collateral of his meltdown. Fun for the whole familia. Yeah, for that, in Illumi's case, it's like, ain't nobody fault in that particular situation. It's like, that's the time. It's like, yeah, I don't blame nobody. You were just in the middle of some mess, which was outside of all of us. Right? It's like, apologies. It's like, that whole situation was just a mess and a half. It was bringing no other emotions like none before. Anyways, but for Hisoka's case, it's like, back up. That's all you really need to do. I feel like that's probably where the problems start. Ain't nobody know how to just back up a little bit. You know about personal space now, I'll tell you that much. Jesus. Okay. Along with violent tendencies, he also has just a disregard for himself, as demonstrated at times in the Heaven's Arena arc, as we discussed. But let me elaborate, right? Let's talk more about that. He's losing limbs. Mr. Potato Head ass, he's losing limbs, okay? Left and right. Just arm missing, leg missing. It's like, Jesus Christ, sir, please keep your limbs on, right? For the grandiose purpose of like both entertainment as well as fighting, right? So it's the thrill of the fight, the appetitive aggression combining, which, by the way, it's to his own detriment because he's losing limbs, which is seen as a thrill, again, to that poor impulse control and appetitive aggressive tendencies, right, that he has. So in Illumi's case, he probably should also just use de-escalation techniques during rage fights and rage fits, which is likely high tendency to get angry. It's like very calm, again, just due to those secure tendencies that he has, right? But it's like after that, just like pray. Or just use de-escalation techniques, which again will be atypical for them. I would not recommend theirs for everybody else, but it works for them, okay? However, those appear to be extremely rare occurrences, and it would be wise to be aware of Hisoka's triggers. I mean, Lumi's too, but Hisoka's triggers, which could be 1, don't ever perceive him as weak or less than. It's a wrap for you. And 2, conversations about the past, which I feel like Illumi already knows, right? As his partner, so it's like, that's fine. Which at first could have been a difficult task, but it's like they learned through it. They learned through the struggle. Again, it might be slightly easier for Illumi, but he would still have to ease into that shit slowly. So maybe talking about the past and do it slowly. Moments of vulnerability, not just weakness, vulnerability as a whole. It's like, take some time to soften up. Which for them, it's like, it might have happened or is happening still currently. Baby steps. Which, to be fair, is happening. The progress, the progression, the development is already there, right? It's just happening in real-time slowness. We're getting there, though. We are getting there as far as character development. Which brings us to the next point, which is patience is a virtue. That is something to keep in mind. Patience be a virtue. And just like with the ADHD requires some patience, so does the ASPD. In the case of ASPD, it is patience when it comes to emotional regulation. Trying not to get swept up in the heat of the moment. It's like, you angry, they angry, now. Alright, it's like calmness, both ends. It can be hard. It's like learning how to re-regulate. Because it's not just about, the emotional part. It's also about, along with emotions, because, like, your mind is connected to your body. So it's like the nervous system is on high, right? It's like, when you are angry, a lot of the times your body is on defense, right? And the goal is to keep your body from feeling so defensive. Your nervous system is on high spikes. It's riddled with craziness. It's like your nervous system is just spiky. It's up there. It's like, the goal is, right, before having any possibly argumentative discussion, is to level those, especially with dealing with ASPD, which shows tendencies of aggression is higher. You don't want that. You want level. You want smooth, calm, crispy. Swept up in the heat of the moment and waiting until things calm down, because again, nervous system, level it out. Calm, serenity. Okay. Healthy communication skills can be used, especially during times of criticism and defensiveness. Alright? So for example, when each partner may want to verbally attack the other due to disruptive behavior, it's preferable for them to actively listen for their partner, in this case Hisoka, and express your feelings about them rather than attacking them directly. So in the case of Illumi, it's like probably you would have to learn to actively listen, aka listen to understand, not listen to respond. For this particular character, that's also not that hard to do, but at the same time, it's like it's a challenge. It's like we all have our moments, all right? All have our crispy, clean, fly moments with that, and for that, I completely get it. I completely understand, right? It's like those moments, baby, they be there. They be out here, they be there. It's some absolute craziness. Right? It's like the time of critique. You want to, again, actively listen, express feelings directly. you want to focus on explaining behaviors that, get on your goddamn nerves. Which, to be fair, especially for potential alexithymia with Illumi as a character, who is also heavily autistic coded, it can be difficult at times, along with not just the autism, but along with the emotional suppression. So maybe that PTSD moment, right, that's coming in, and anxiety around emotions, considering the household that he has lived in as an individual for so long. It's gonna take a while to open up too, it's like both ends. Like, it's gonna take a while. That trust needs to be established, which, for them as partners, it's like took a while to establish, right? I'm sure it's there already. So there's that. Trusting each other enough to put their lives in each other's hands. They take till death do us part a little too literal, a little too serious. But for them it works. Wouldn't recommend it for everyone else. For them it works. But yeah, guiding the conversation together after calming down. So after calming down, guiding each other is like, how do we get here, right? It's like, and again, that intellectualism is also helpful for them both as characters in general, which they have. So yeah, just like arguments for these two characters we see not happen as often. It's like they have moments of disagreements in the show, definitely, right? But you see how they resolve like their issues pretty fast. It's like they laugh about it after. It's like they know how to resolve issues quickly, right? Contrary to popular belief. It's like, they know how to resolve their shit. It's like they have arguments, they have their moments, they resolve it with quickness, right? Healthy communication. We love to see it. So the best thing Illumi can do when Hisoka becomes defensive is, again, wait until he apologizes for his actions. You won't see this apology for any other character. I want to get this out the way once again. Any other character, you ain't gonna see apology. But if you're Illumi, you're gonna see an apology. That's it. Baby steps. Baby steps, okay? Which, for people with ASPD, may take a little while. Another factor to consider is that Hisoka can be a secretive individual. Again, something we see within the series a lot. Very secretive. And that's, again, a result of both dismissive avoidance attachment as well as ASPD. ASPD individuals, they also tend to keep everything to themselves. So you got that mixed in with dismissive avoidance, which that tendency is also high for those individuals. It's fun for the whole familia. They rarely reveal private information unless it's to benefit them, and even then it's not that much. And in this relationship opening up, that vulnerability, that trust will be what Hisoka needs to develop, which canonically appears to already be happening, right? As previously discussed in the relationship stages of Hisoka and Illumi, which is a podcast I did earlier. So there's a little bit more detail as to how with the stages, but it's like, yeah, took some time. So although Hisoka giving off a few subtle clues, like preferring to sit alone in group settings, as visually seen, and keeping people away from him through aggressive means, mind you, right? Being seen as like the big bad character, it's like deterring people away. It's like, yeah, it's kind of the point. At least for long periods of time. And, it can be difficult to see. It's like, keeping people away from him, except for Illumi, it's only person that he would not mind to get close to, right? It's like, everybody's like, oh, let's stay away from him. It's like, we don't like you. It's like, he does not care. Probably would prefer it that way. He doesn't fuck with people unless you're Illumi. Gotta establish this. Get this clear and in the air. It's like, you're gonna hear that often. It's like, unless you're Illumi. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Yeah, it can be difficult to tell that ASPD people, right? Individuals do not enjoy being around people because of their charm. And since Hisoka is also a celebrity, that too, it's especially difficult to tell he doesn't really fuck with people, right? It's kind of the ironic parts of fame, where it's like, yes, you like these fans, quote unquote, not love, like, right? These fans, it's like, you wouldn't be where you are. It's like, whatever, right? All that. But at the same time, it's like, you don't want them so close and personal, which I get for a celebrity. Kind of establishing that boundary, right, with parasocial relationships can be difficult, right? There's only so much that you could do, let's be real. But at the same time, that boundary has to be established. But for Hisoka as a character, it's like, that's obviously not hard to establish that boundary at all. People will try it, though, all the time. So we clearly see. People will try it. Which my question is, why? I don't know. Take your poison, take your pick. So yeah, it's like it can be really difficult to tell that, because of the charm that, ASPD individuals also have. They have that charm to, enchant someone. They have that charm to essentially bring people close. And they display like really, really great social skills, right? They really know how to enchant a crowd. But they don't fuck with people. Again, same thing as I've discussed before with the whole, you're an assassin, but you don't like guns. Same thing here. It's like, you're charming, but you don't fuck with people. A gesture that doesn't really like a crowd, but it's like, doesn't hate the crowd, loves the attention. Doesn't love the people that comes with the attention. It's ironic. It's insane. It makes sense and it doesn't. It's absurd. Which for this particular character, being absurd is kind of the norm. So let's keep going, right? Among these things, right? And another thing to take account is the unfortunate fact that people with ASPD, like Hisoka, are also more prone to develop addiction disorders because of their problems with impulse control. Given that Hisoka was raised in an environment similar to Las Vegas, it's also likely that his apparent, sex addiction, also known as hypersexuality, which there's little clues about, but it's like it's there, is the result of trauma and environmental exposure. We'll talk more in specific detail as how that might be when we get to his essay. We're not in his essay, so this is what we know so far. So in addition to hypersexuality, there is a high likelihood of substance abuse disorders because according to the APA, also known as the American Psychiatric Association, among males with alcoholism, 70% also have ASPD. Now I want to, bring in a little antidote, bring in a little evidence from another series, right? Let's use some comparison here. So like a good example would be like Rick from Rick and Morty and how he's also an alcoholic, right? And how he also has ASPD as well. We'll get into that later, but yeah, he also has it as well. It's not surprising for a lot of these characters who also are more than likely to have cluster B disorders to develop a problem with like specifically alcohol, but other drugs as well, right? And that's due to that impulse control issues, amongst other things, which we will discuss once again in more grand detail when we get to his essay. But it's like, yeah, it's a common thing. I would not be surprised if that's the case off screen, not on screen, but off. Hisoka may, as we know, self-medicate with alcohol and other substances to deal with negative emotions. And again, I use the example of Rick tending to do that, right? So it's like, for these specific characters, I would not be surprised, right, if that's the case. So if signs of alcoholism are present, the only solution for Illumi would be to just seek treatment, because there ain't much that you can do to accommodate that unless you want to dig yourself deeper into a hole. So it's also help with learning skills to, manage ASPD, right? Because it's like people normally who have ASPD don't seek treatment for the disorder itself unless it's like a huge problem, right? And they figure out it's like, yeah, I have a problem, which can be hard for them to admit, along with it being court ordained. But considering their type of world, it's not going to be, because there's a lot of freeway, wiggle room when it comes to things like violence. They tend to be in a more violent world than ours. There's a more neutrality around things like violence. So it's not really as big of a problem there as it is in our universe. So you're going to have to use a lot more for it to be considered a problem, you know? Along with the fact of him being a hunter, right? And those tendencies being used for work as well. There's that. So, yeah, it's not really going to be seen as much of a problem. Hunter and being the type of athlete, sports fighting in Pacific, where it's like those, you know, for example, the violent and impulsive tendencies are used for work. So it's like, it's not really seen as a problem per se. So probably would go into like treat, you know, alcoholism, also known as now AUD, right? Alcohol use disorder. And then slowly maybe find ways to treat ASPD, but it's like a very slow cycle. Point is, Illumi should also just advocate for his partner. That being said, which is not a problem for this character at all, giving his managerial skills, right, along with being the sage mother archetype that we've discussed a little earlier. It wouldn't be hard for this character to do, right? Mother / caregiving archetype, it's like, it's not hard for this character to do. You know, those controlling tendencies, right, the more so for the shadow side, right, of the caregiver archetype, right, those controlling tendencies that have been discussed, helpful. It's actually a good thing. This particular situation. It's like, again, Hisoka and Illumi seeing like those traits that other people associate negative as positive, really helpful here, especially, right? So, it all comes back circling around. After all, most important thing for Illumi to remember is that it's also essential for any positive character development for him, because again, the goal is to be self-autonomous for this character. The goal is to, you know, not live for the sake of other people, more so live for themselves, you know. So the big important part is that take some time for himself. That's the important part when it comes to accommodating from both ends, right? It's not unequal. It's all about evenness in this relationship. It's an egalitarian relationship, right? It's like take some time to himself. In other words, rest. Tend to help, like, you know, not stress each other out. So I would imagine, you know, Hisoka, just as a partner in general, it's like, because it's even, right? Don't want to odd things out. Sure would find ways to help Illumi relax, right? Still find that level of evenness. Resting is important. Their relationship, again, works best when things are balanced. All about balance, all about working as a team, partners in crime, that kind of dynamic, you know, fun stuff. But it's also important to just have that in their quiet moments too. So that includes dealing with each other's mental health issues, right? Just all of that together. Another factor to consider is that ASPD people, individuals, are more likely to be predisposed to depression. So along with, you know, having substance use disorders, you also just have depression in general. And for, you know, men especially, / a male at birth individuals, it manifests as male at birth individuals, socialized as male, all of that. It manifests as in a slightly different way for anyone who's a female at birth, feminine individuals, anyone who's socialized as female. And men / masculine people, they tend to just deny their depression, right? We talked about a lot of the times how, you know, men's suicide rates are so high, right? This is one of the main reasons for that, right? Is that that denial to get mental health help, and just that denial that they have a problem, right? Because that problem is perceived as a vulnerability. And according to the male socialization, men are socialized to not perceive themselves as vulnerable. We'll get into the more, you know, crux of that, the more nuanced parts of that when we get to Hisoka's analysis, because, you know, it's a little bit of a difference there. But yeah, it's like perceived as vulnerable, weak, last thing you need to be perceived as, which for this character especially, you see a lot of that mindset. So it might not be seen in an emotional front, but maybe manifests in a more physical way. So it's like, even if they don't say anything, their body can basically say there's something wrong. Which, again, on top of that, Hisoka, along with male socialization, being also a dismissive avoidant, That's just going to be amplified to the 10th degree. It's just going to get worse from here. So along with the common symptoms of depression, there's also like additional factors that specifically men, masculine, socialized as male individuals tend to have, which is as follows. Let's go down the list. Okay. We got anger / irrationality or irritability towards everything, which again is increased by both ASPD and ADHD. Not all, but a lot due to that impulsive moment. They have a higher tendency to be irritable. Not everyone, but a lot do. Along with ASPD and the hypersensitivity and the higher tendencies towards aggression as well. We have reckless behavior, again, increased by ASPD and ADHD. Both their impulsive, symptoms could increase the reckless behavior. We have the substance abuse, which we have discussed can also be increased by ASPD. We got the escapism behavior, which is basically finding ways to escape from the current reality, right? It can look like disassociation, but there's also other things as well, right? Maybe using other activities to distract from the pain. So in the case for like Hisoka specifically, it could be fighting, right? It could be maybe more so going into like random fights, not organized, but like random fights, right? It could be, I guess, murderous tendencies, right? But like not like controlled, again, because with assassination jobs like that, right, with his fiance, it's controlled. We're talking uncontrolled, like just from the get. And other escapist behaviors, which we will discuss in more detail when we get to his character analysis. But like, yeah, a few examples of that. Sexual dysfunction in the case of depressed individuals instead of hypersexuality. It can be hyper, but we haven't really seen that. More so common for specifically depression would be hyposexuality. So we normally see this character, which again is the jester archetype, so we adds on to that high libido, high sex drive. But in the case of like, instead of that going on, it's the opposite. So it's like decreased sexual tendencies, right? And especially for his fiance to notice, it would be like, yeah, especially for an individual like him, it'd be the most noticeable thing that something is wrong. Increased anxiety, which again for this character would probably look different, right? But it's like that might be there. And career issues, which we have not seen as of yet, right? As far as career issues go, but it's like it varies. It really varies. It doesn't necessarily mean like about to get fired per se. Again, it varies. And you have like your general symptoms for depression as well. So the general symptoms, meaning like just symptoms of depression in general, is the loss of interest in activities, right? Just doesn't want to do shit as much. Sleep disturbances such as insomnia or narcolepsy, which is sleeping too much. Insomnia is like you're not sleeping at night at all. It's like, motherfucker, you are hyper, you are awake, you are aware. And narcolepsy is the opposite. Motherfucker, you sleeping all the time. If you're narcoleptic. Lack of energy. You have disordered eating, feelings of worthlessness or guilt. And with disordered eating, it can mean like not eating as much or eating too much. And especially for someone who is essentially an athlete, that would be a bit difficult and probably the most noticeable trait as well. So you also have feeling of worthlessness or guilt, which maybe not the guilt part per se, but the feelings of worthlessness, which can be increased by ASPD and ADHD. And that's due to the hypersensitivity of ASPD and rejection sensitive dysphoria that comes with ADHD. It's like that could increase tenfold because of that. You also have your trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions, and remembering things, which could be increased by like the tendencies that already come with ADHD, and you have that tenfold, but now it's also just frustrating to deal with, right? So it's just like there's that going on. And then you have suicidal ideations and attempts. Fun stuff. Do with that information as you will. So let's continue on. To accommodate depression, Illumi would first need to hire servants, which he probably would already do anyways, to do any chores that might be missed during Hisoka's depressive episodes. It's like, if he ends up potentially being Hisoka's manager for real, depending how the development goes, it's like, it's something he probably planned on doing from the get-go. He's probably excited about it. Got a little chart and everything. Right? But anyways, if it ever occurred, right? So then he must help remind Hisoka of more so positive qualities, being that encouraging partner. He'd be like, encouraging him in atypical manners, maybe like a mission, maybe play fighting, albeit in a somewhat extreme way, according to us, but for them, it's fine. It's like their way of like hyping each other up, The goal is not to like make these characters stagnant and take off any point of their personality, period. The goal is just to put that more in a positive light, right? It's like you got the dark shadow portion of the archetype. The goal is to just flip it around to the lighter portion. That's it, right? We're not changing the fundamentals of these characters. We're just flipping it a little bit. So anyways, continuing on to say, I just want to reiterate that, right? Because it's like I say, their way. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means their way of doing things. It's different. So, another thing to do, right, for Illumi during this time, other than his encouragement, is adjust expectations, which for perfectionists, coming from a perfectionist my damn self, is going to be hard at first. But it's like, you've got to. Life ain't gonna go your way all the time. And anticipate little to be accomplished. It's gonna happen. Just flip around those expectations. It's therefore best to alter plans and relax at home rather than work during these times. Also, avoid being resentful, which again is likely for this character, but it's like the patience part would probably prevent that from, being expanded upon. Which brings us back to the patience theme again. That patience got to be there, which for a character who's within the caregiver archetype would not be hard. So again, Illumi must remember to take care of himself, which the self-sacrifice, speaking of caregiving, self-sacrificing tendencies, right? Being altruistic to an extreme degree. It's like, we're not here for that. Which again, due to the fact that caregiving tendencies is already within the shadow portion, which is what we are currently dealing with. Kind of want to bring the opposite of that, right? Remember to take care of himself, which is especially important given, again, those codependent tendencies and, again, the other tendencies that tend to come with just his character archetype in general. At the end of the day, so his problems are still his own. Not responsibility to solve them 100%, right? Maybe help out every now and again, but it's like solve? No. It's like you're not there to fix your partner. Which, by the way, I feel like people just in general need to hear this message. You're not there to fix your partner. You're there to add on a supplement. You're there to help out. And you're not there to fix anything, right? You're not Captain Save-Up. Come on. Alright? Helping is acceptable. Ain't nothing wrong with help. But it's critical to distinguish. At the end of the day, feelings, emotions, mental health issues are his, not yours, Let's get that clear. Let's get that in the open. Yeah. Right? That's a huge part of this character's development as well, right? It's just like, whoa, back it up there, my brother. Take care of yourself. With all that in mind, navigating accommodations may appear to be a maze for these two individuals at first. But they can work it out using their own methods while maintaining all the healthy characteristics of a healthy relationship. Through their versions of accommodating can be considered atypical, it still works for their relationship. Now, a partnership is about working through both the joyful and more difficult parts of life as a team. That's what it's all about. Again, it's all boiled down to being symbiotic with somebody else. Healthy accommodations consist of sharing responsibility, negotiating, being fair, and respecting one another, Whether it's, a romantic relationship in this case, or any other type. That's all it's what it's about. It's about finding a way to balance their differences in a beautiful and smooth way. Life ain't easy. We know. especially when you are dealing with mental illnesses and neurodivergencies. But with the help of somebody else, in this case a romantic partner, it feels like you're not alone and that somebody's on your side. Which for these particular characters is probably the largest development of all. They're not alone. They don't have to feel like they're alone anymore. They finally have somebody else. Which, isn't that what we all need? Isn't that the main theme for this entire story? Right? It's about human connection. It's about friendship. And what greater friendship is there than here? Anyways, a romantic partner in this case specifically, it feels like there's just someone by you. It's like, wow, my whole life I thought I'd be alone. I thought I would have to suffer on my own, but I don't have to. There's someone who's by my side even if other people don't want to be. There's somebody there. There's somebody for everybody. Ain't that crazy? Okay, maybe not everybody. We'll talk about the fourth prince in a minute, but like for most people. Which for these two characters certainly helps to counteract those negative thought patterns that we have discussed earlier with their insecure attachments. And that's really what it boils down to, right? So when we get into the next thing, we are going to talk more so about like the financial aspects of the relationship. See how it balances out on a financial way, right? We want to talk about things like budgeting, assets, all the full, cool, fun stuff. It's going to get a little more mathematical. So bring out a notepad. Get ready. And yes, this includes their prenup. I'm going to discuss what a prenup is because it turns out the majority of people who read that part is like, what the fuck is a prenup? I'm going to explain in the next part. You won't be lost. Finally, you'll know what a prenup is. So in the following sections of Hisoka and Illumi's economic partnership, right, which everybody talks about, but nobody knows the details of, and nobody can explain it right, but bitch, I'm here for that. I'm going to explain it the correct way, because y'all deserve that. As well as also diving into how their backgrounds, right, so like their childhood backgrounds, how that can influence their financial decisions, because it turns out how you were raised can also influence your financial decisions. I did not know that till I did the research. But we're going to get into this together, all right? Amongst other things as well. So in the next part, which will come back in a little later, we're going to be discussing the economic partnership of Hisoka and Illumi, which is what a lot of people talk about, but they don't talk about it in the right way. I'm going to do it the right way. All right? Anyways, I hope y'all have a good day. And this is in for the latest podcast, which is about accommodations. Next one is going to be about finances. I will see y'all tomorrow. Not tomorrow. I'll see y'all next time. Let's not make any brand new promises. It's like, I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.